Well, you know what really suck? If you become a ghost and you still need eyeglasses to see, I'd be so pissed off. I'd be like, after I get hit by the train or whatever, I'd be get up. Oh, I'm a ghost now. I'm wearing glasses and I need them. This sucks. It'd be like a guy in a wheelchair who becomes a ghost. He's like, I still need a ghost wheelchair now. Anyways.
Welcome to Page and Screen. This is a book club for books adapted to movies and a movie club for movies adapted from books. My name is Calvin, and I refuse to believe that the brown man's favorite food is shepherd pie.
Hi, my name is Doug. The Haunting of Bly Manor, more like the Haunting of Ghost Nerd.
Hi, I'm Jesse Mully, and I don't like Henry Thomas's smile.
Oh my God.
Hi, I'm Ashton Sanborn, and Miles never fooled me for a second. I knew he was up to no good the whole time.
Like, put aside the fact that Owen had probably eaten desi food in his life, but then he also studied cooking in France. Okay, and then you're telling me he's gonna say his favorite food is fucking meat and potatoes? No, bullshit. This episode, we are discussing The Turn of the Screw. The Turn of the Screw was a novella written by Henry James in 1898, and it was adapted to The Haunting of Bly Manor in 2020, created by Mike Flanagan. All right, so we can dive into the novella, some classic Victorian horror, Turn of the Screw. What did everyone think?
Boring.
Yeah, boy oh boy, this was a tough one to get through, but
yeah, it was very slow. I felt like I was constantly rereading it. Just like I'll read like 3 pages and be like, I didn't absorb anything that happened in those 3 pages. Like, I enjoyed the concept of the story. It was hard to get through, and it was very slow moving. And that the ending was like, wait, what?
It's so anticlimactic. Yeah.
Does anybody feel that the way this book was written wasn't even right? Like, it just, like, when you're reading along with it or listening to the audiobook, for me, I just couldn't get into it. But not only that, I just had a hard time understanding what was going on.
Like, it might just be like language, like issue, like in terms of like how old this text was. It was written in the 1890s. But that being said, like, I've read other Gothic horror. Like, I just read Dracula, and like I've read Frankenstein and stuff like that. And even for that time period, this is like excessively like descriptive language, and it's a lot of like beating around a point. Basically, like, every chapter is her just like talking about, I saw a ghost. But she takes the most roundabout way to get around to explaining that, oh, this was a ghost, and I think like that's what was so hard about it, is because like the plot line is immensely interesting. Like, I had heard about the Turn of the Screw, before I even got around to watching the TV show, and it sounded like something that was right up my alley. Cool, classic ghost story, haunted house kind of scenario. I'm so down for this. It's just, it is a lot of words to get a very small story across.
Mm-hmm. She was making a bunch of strange, well, not strange, but like in my mind when I was reading it, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like all her jumps were insanely wild. Like, it was just like, oh, there's a ghost in the house. Obviously, they want the children.
That's true.
Right? Like,
yeah,
it just kind of was like...
yeah.
Like, it didn't really, like, I was like, why do you think they want the children? Like, they haven't said a thing.
Yeah. No, it is super strange. I also thought, like, one of the things that stood out for me the most, because we read this in pretty close succession to Haunting of Hill House. In Hill House, there's very little ghost activity, but I still felt like the language was a lot more interesting, and it really kind of suckered me in, and it kind of built the sense of dread. In Turn of the Screw, there's so much fucking haunting. Like she is seeing full-bodied apparitions every day, like, you know, in the night, in the morning, like during the day. I'm like, whoa, like there is so much haunting that happens in this book, but she addresses it in the most like clinical, non-interesting way that I'm just like, what? Like, what is this? Like, it feels like just a very sterile kind of way to describe the stuff that's happening. And I'm like, I would think that if this is a ghost story, you would be trying to spook people.
Yeah, it's like the worst ghost party ever. It's like you're sitting there like brooding the entire time. It's like, oh, this guy has something great up his sleeve. He's like, let me send away for it. Like, and then the SpongeBob, like 3 days later, like it pops up, and then he's like, I finally got this from my manservant or whatever it was.
Yeah, like the buildup is great. The first like 3 pages of like the storyteller setting this up,
and then he proceeds to literally just read like a 4-hour letter that he that he had once. Like I would be sitting there and be like, yo, dude, can you just get to the point? It's been like 2.5 hours, and I get it. And then especially if you did sit there the entire like 3 or 4 hours of like this guy reading a letter, by the end you'd be like, so the kid died mysteriously. Okay, thanks for all that stuff. Also, spoiler alert, by the way.
Well, okay, maybe you should just get into the ending now. Did everyone like pick up on what happens in the end?
I thought the kid died of fright, but then I didn't know because I know she's holding the kid. So I either thought he died of fright or she was so scared she strangled him to death. Mm-hmm. But by the ending, I just really didn't care anymore. Like I thought about it for a couple seconds. I was like, okay, well, whatever.
I guess he's dead.
I guess he's dead.
I was really confused with that ending too as well. And I kind of had to like look it up and be like, am I like missing something? And like basically what I got the impression of too, after like reading a bunch of interpretations, because there's a lot of different interpretations of what that ending is. And supposedly the only person who's been seeing the ghost the entire, and like, then I thought about it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally true. The only person who's been seeing the ghost the entire time is the governess. And so, and she was holding him close. So she ended up, like, I think people said that she was actually crazy and there weren't any ghosts. And she actually ended up smothering the child. And that's why he died.
Strange thing to write into a letter.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off. Go ahead, man.
No, it's okay. I think so I did definitely read that interpretation. I basically read that it was like, you could either look at this from 2 different perspectives. One is the governess is this hero who's just protecting these children from, a supernatural force. The second is that it's a woman slowly going crazy and then tragically killing one of these kids, or a child dying in her care kind of thing. I think I lean more towards the first version. Like I think I lean more towards looking at it as a supernatural story, and that there were ghosts in it because that's what it's billed as, So in my mind, that's what I want to read. I want to read this ghost story. My interpretation was that the ghosts were possessing the kids, and obviously we'll get to Bly Manor and how this does kind of take place in Bly Manor more. And I feel that whatever happens at the end was the ghost of Quint leaving Miles, and Miles dying because of that, because the ghost leaves him. But yeah, that was my interpretation. I don't know.
Yeah, Doug, I read that one as well. I'd read that interpretation as well.
So here's what happened to me. So so the audiobook I'm reading is on YouTube and it's broken up into 5 parts, right? So I listened to the first 4 parts, and then the 4th part ends, and then it stops, and it's like, this is the recording, and I didn't realize there was a part 5 to this book. So I'm sitting around for like half a day thinking, did I miss something? Was there something spooky that was supposed to happen? Because I think the end of the book is this little girl, or they find this little girl beside the lake and they're freaking out or something. And I'm like, I guess that's an okay ending, but it literally makes no sense. It's like, and I guess Ashton did tell me it ends pretty abruptly. So I look at a summary online, and as I'm reading it, because I wanted to look at a summary to see if I missed something obviously important. And then I started reading more. I'm like, oh, wait a second, there's more to this book. So
you have the book too, right? Like you could have flipped, like read the book and found that it was.
I was also driving. Okay, wow, what's this guy's problem? So, anyways, I was indeed driving when I was reading, when I was listening to the final part of this. Anyways, all beside the point. So once I finished it this morning, I didn't actually think about what you guys just said. I thought it was just a possession, and it just like Peter Quint leaving the kid's body killed him, right? That's what I thought. And then you guys were talking about it like she may have killed him, it may have been mental illness. And I'm like, yeah, that actually makes way more sense to me. But anyways, that was my initial interpretation, was that that he was possessed and Peter Quint leaving him killed him. And so yes, that's and then at the end of the book, I'm like, that makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot better of an ending than I initially thought. So,
but yeah, like it is such a confusing way, and it does end so abruptly. Like, I fully expected it to go back to the framing narrative that you see at the start, to go back to the storyteller telling the story and like having to explain like, well, we don't really know what happened, but she's dead now. I just thought it was so strange that they had this framing narrative at the start, but they never return to it. Like they just end this story abruptly. Was anyone like genuinely spooked by it at any point?
It goes back to that whole thing where, all these older horror books and stories, they're not scary to us because we're so exposed to like the next level of horror. So they're like, oh, I saw Peter Quint standing on the stairs, and I'm sure like Victorian era, so somebody'd be like, oh, I can't sleep because Peter Quint's on the stairs. But us, we're like, and like if somebody ran into my room and was like, I just saw a ghost on the stairs, I'm like, okay, cool. Is that it? Is that the end of your story? Okay.
No, you wouldn't. Okay.
I've been in that exact situation where I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, maybe I would be like, oh crap, you saw a ghost on the stairs, let's go check this out or whatever.
To some extent, what you're saying is true. We are so desensitized to this type of horror, but it's like, this was written in the 1890s, and there are so many horror stories that are similar to this. Like I feel like this is where the concept of children being creepy, like this is probably one of the first books to like really explore that. But like for me, like whenever I pick up a horror book, to me, like the creepiest part is always the start of it. I've found that to kind of consistently be the case, is like it's mostly just like the anticipation of like, oh, like what's gonna happen, and then depending on the book, it either like really delivers on that, or in the case of Turn the Screw, it doesn't. The first like 3 pages of him like talking about how like really hyping up this fucking ghost story that he's gonna tell, I was like, oh shit, like this has got to be really spooky, and that was my anticipation. Like after that, it like quickly goes downhill.
Turn of the Screw is good ASMR material. Really, if you want to just go to sleep, just put that on and go to sleep. Really, could not get interested whatsoever. While I was watching Haunting of Bly Manor, I was like, oh crap, I should probably be doing this, because I was scared.
It's interesting, and we'll get into Bly Manor here in a second, but I was obviously reading it knowing that we were going to watch the show right after. As I was reading it, I was like, oh man, they are serving up some really good scenes, because there's so much haunting, right? Like she sees ghosts all the goddamn time, to the point where I'm like if you're a paranormal investigator, like dude, like this is like your bread and butter. So reading that, I was like, oh, like I can't wait to see how they do it, and they did. But yeah, we can start wrapping up here on Turn of the Screw. Does anyone have anything else that they want to add?
Not really. Yeah, like I think we pretty much touched on it all. The kids, like they were in the book, they're definitely explained to be like perfect children. that was an ongoing mystery throughout the whole thing. Is like, what did Miles do to get expelled from his school? No, they
That
didn't
he
even
stole letters. Like
Yeah.
that she suspects that he stole, which I'm like,
That's
I don't know what Victorian era England was like, but
they're
I
super
guess that's
extreme with their
yeah.
punishment for freaking stealing letters. Yeah, so like it was like that, but like obviously like throughout you're kind of like, okay, these kids can't be this good. There's something like something's got to be wrong with them. And then lo and behold, you start getting glimpses of these like weird things that these kids are doing, and it's because they were possessed. Like, right, like it's one of those things, because it's still a question at the end of the book. There's so many questions and not very many answers, but at the end of the book, were they possessed? Was it all in her head? What did he do to get expelled as a kid? But then again, it's Victorian era, they get some serious punishment for almost nothing.
Probably use the Lord's name in vain or something like that.
Yeah, it's probably, or something like that. But yeah, like I think that was it. It was just like there was just so many unanswered questions by the end that it kind of left me unsatisfied.
What's it called? Yeah, no, I'm just showing off my book because I'm a super fan, and no one else is, as far as I know. So
it's so funny because I actually gave Doug that copy. Like that's my copy of the book. Cool. So he's just
this is only the second time that I have the actual copy. I read I guess Starship Troopers and this one are the only two where I actually had the physical copy of the book. The rest were all like e-readers or audiobooks.
I might buy this book actually, even though I didn't like it, because I just want to have it. So next time I'm at a ghost story party, I'll just be
like, boy, I have a story for you.
Let me mail it off. Let me mail off and get someone to bring it to me.
I'll be like, everybody's telling all these ghost stories, and I'm like, man, Douglas is brooding over there. He must have something big up his sleeve. And then I'm like, let me just phone somebody, and I'll phone Ashton and be like, hey, Ashton, can you FedEx me your version of the turn of the screw? You know, 1 day later, open it, be like, okay, guys, I'm gonna read this to you, and it's gonna be the slowest book in it's gonna be the least scary thing in history.
It's like an Andy Kaufman skit.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's like an Andy Kaufman sketch.
I like how they were able to keep the momentum of a ghost story night over the course of an entire day while they're waiting for a letter to arrive.
Okay, yeah, I guess we could get into The Haunting of Bly Manor. Which, came out very recently, October of 2020, just in time for Halloween. The second this trailer dropped for this series, I was like, oh boy, I want to read this book. I want to watch this immediately. Like, I'm so hyped for it. So yeah, Bly Manor is kind of the follow-up to Hill House. Mike Flanagan show runs it again. It's super cool. I love the concept of an anthology horror series. I don't know if they're going to do a series 3. From what I understand, he's busy on another project, but it feels like what he's doing is what American Horror Story kind of tried to do, but he's just doing it so much better. To get into Bly Manor a little bit, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think inevitably you kind of compare it to Hill House, and I think they're very different series altogether. Like initially, my thought was, my gut reaction was I did prefer Hill House more, but Bly Manor is such a different show, and the tone of it is so different. And really, the ending is what like really hits you in the fact that like, oh, like this story was about something else, you know, in a way that was like really quite lovely and not what I was expecting, especially in comparison to Turn of the Screw. It's very different from the ending of Turn of the Screw. And I love the ending of Bly Manor. Like, that's what, similar to Hill House, I feel like the ending of Bly Manor is what really sells the show for me. He does this great thing where his endings really wrap up the rest of the storyline and really kind of put it into perspective. And I've kind of like seen that, like, not just in the TV shows that he's done, but I've kind of seen that in like the movies that he's done too, you know, with Hush and with Dr. Sleep. Hush in particular, because it's a small storyline, but the ending kind of encapsulates the rest of the movie, you know. And it's the same with Doctor Sleep, where it's not so much of a small storyline, it's huge, and there's so much kind of mythology and like, I guess, like a universe that he's dealing with The Shining and stuff like that. But like the ending really kind of encapsulates the rest of it, you know. That, I think, more than anything, is what he's so good at, is he's really good at the endings, and Bly Manor has a pretty solid ending, which I don't know, we could get to in due time. But what's everyone else's reaction?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Like, I think you're right. It's inevitable. You're going to compare the two series, and I think I'm with you. I definitely think I got way more into Hill House than I did Bly Manor. I did like Bly Manor, especially as it kind of sat and percolated. Because at first it was kind of like, I was like, the first half of it, I was like, oh, this is kind of slow. This is kind of like, because Hill House was, for me, it was like captivating, and like I was into it for like the first half, like all the way through. And I definitely liked the ending of Bly Manor more than I liked the ending of Hill House. I think I mentioned it in that podcast about Hill House, is like the ending was a little too saccharine and sweet for me. Like, it was like, and all the ghosts lived happily ever after together. And it was kind of like, okay, like that was like slightly not what I expected. But Bly Manor's ending was fantastic. All the actors were fantastic. The guy who plays Peter Quint, really good. Me and Doug were watching Bly Manor together. We never called him Peter Quint. We were like Luke, because Luke was the guy who played in Hill House. But he's really good. And what's her name? The governess.
Danny. Yeah.
I was like, once again, I was like, Nell. But
we kept calling her Nell. In fact, we just, and actually, except the uncle, which we called Elliot. We basically called them all by their Hill House names every time they popped up. But
but like I did really like all the characters and the actors, and I'm actually been a really big fan ever since Hill House of Katie Siegel. I was a little disappointed that she only was in like, one episode, but
it's a good episode though.
It was it's a very good episode. She did a really good job. But like I said, all the actors did a great job in it. All the new people were really good in it. The guy who played Owen, the girl who played Hannah was really good.
So hot. The guy who plays Owen.
Like at the end of the day, like I thought that, and like everything they added, like obviously they were going to have to add a lot because it's a novella that's 120 pages and you made it 9 episodes long. So like 9-hour-long episodes. So they added a lot in, but it was a lot of like really good adds, and they took the scenes that were in the book and elevated them to be actually a lot more creepy and scary than the book actually did. So I was very happy with the series at the end of the day.
So as Ashton and I were watching it, I kept just mentioning stuff like one thing I noticed is there are a lot of themes, like themes of loss, themes of even like mental illness were kind of crossing over the two series. So I kind of see how they were able to build two. Like, of course, there are two completely separate stories, but I kept seeing similarities between the two. I also kind of liked I like watching the second series more because they had set up rules in the first series about ghosts can only do this, ghosts can only do that, right? And so I like how they built on those things more. Overall, I like the acting. Ashton and I, we both commented when Elliot was like speaking in English, in like an English accent. We were like, oh man, he's actually like super good with an English. If I didn't know he wasn't English, I'd totally buy his accent. Peter Quint. Sorry, I make that mistake often. Peter Quint, he had like a an Irish accent, and I'm just like, it's
Scottish.
He didn't do a very good. He didn't do a very good job as far as I'm concerned.
How dare you?
With, Luke lighting it up. Actually, he's actually English too. Like he's from.
Shut up. Seriously?
Yeah.
What? That's crazy.
You know what?
Because I've only seen him in Bly Manor. I only saw him in Hill House and Invisible Man. Both of those, he's doing an American accent.
But apparently, he's also the bad guy in the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson movie Faster.
Oh, fuck. Yeah. That sounds great.
Yeah, and so that led to Ashton and I discussing whether Fighting with Our Family is in the top 10 of of Dwayne the Rock Johnson films. And sorry, I completely no, but that was an actual conversation that we'll probably have later on. But uh, no, I thought it was an excellent. I actually quite like this series more. Um, but yeah, it just had all those same themes of sadness and loss. The last episode was done. Greg Sestero was in the last episode. It was directed by Tommy Wiseau.
No, it wasn't. Shut up.
I'm
No,
not
but Greg
joking.
Sestero was in it. Greg Sestero was in the episode.
Who was Greg Sestero?
He was the guy that the girl was marrying, like at the wedding.
That's why I
Oh
look
my
familiar.
god.
It's Greg
Yep.
Sestero. And like
Nice.
Doug pointed it out. I'm like, no, it is. Oh my god, it is.
And then Tommy
Nice.
Wiseau was in the wedding background as well.
No,
No, that's
he
not true.
wasn't.
He's like,
That's-
oh hi wedding, like he's,
he tries to steal the show. He just starts like yelling out fake lines that no one gave him.
what do you think about this, Jesse?
So quite a lot. So going from Turn of the Screw to Bly Manor was like such a huge improvement. It was like a kid handing in like a bad paper that he didn't do, and the teacher's like, "No, go do it again." And he came back and put effort into it. So immediately, kudos to that. I thought Hill House was a lot scarier. And to bring up the point, there was always those hidden ghosts in Hill House, right? And in Haunting of Bly Manor, they're way more obvious. But I feel they're way more obvious for a reason, is because you find out each one of these ghosts is really directly laid in with the story there. For example, when I noticed the plague doctor sitting in the corner there, I was like, oh shit, that's kind of creepy. But you see him, he's a little bit more obvious than some of the ghosts in like, say, Hill House are. He's deliberately put there, or he's, over on the side. The no-face doll ghost, the moaning ghost upstairs, all of these way more integral to the plot. And I feel as if they thought, maybe some of these ghosts are a little too hard to miss, or too easy to miss in Hill House, so they made it more obvious. That being said, I like the story in Bly Manor a little bit more than Hill House, and the reason is I'm not a big fan of the time travel aspect in Haunting of Hill House, where they're jumping back and forth, that they're seeing themselves as ghosts. But what I did like was the dream sharing in Haunting of Bly Manor, how when these ghosts possess the kids, they push them into a memory or a dream, so to speak. I did quite like that. So I don't know, just the way it felt was a bit better. Overall, I like the story more, but Hill House just had me like way more scared. So.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think Hill House definitely was scarier, and I felt like watching Bly Manor too. I got episode 5, and I was like, not a lot of scares so far. Like it kind of took its time getting into it. The last 4 episodes get like considerably more spooky, or like I guess like just in terms of like what they're going through, like it really does kind of ramp up, and you start to really get a sense of the haunting and stuff like that. The thing about most horror stories that tends to draw me out of them or really pull me out of them is when you start explaining the mechanics of, think about like in Insidious, when you start explaining why there's this like ghost world, something like that, and how that works. Or in The Conjuring 2, when you start to explain how Lorraine has these visions. There's something about taking something that's supernatural and applying these like really strange like rules and regulations to it that really takes me out of it. And to that end, I didn't like the dream hopping in Bly Manor. I felt like that really pulled me out of it. I think when Hannah goes through it, it was really effective. I think it's like episode 6 when you first go through that dream hopping, because that's the other thing too, is the show is so different from Hill House in the fact that like it's so linear, right? Like the first 5 episodes happen in perfect linear order, And then it's not till episode 6 that you start doing this dramatic kind of like jumping through narrative. When it happens to Hannah, it was interesting. And it kind of made sense to me because I was like, oh, like it's because she's dead. It's because she's already a ghost.
Yeah.
So she's jumping through these narratives, and it makes sense that like she's in a sort of purgatory and she can't seem to snap herself out of it, right? When it's happening to the kids, it made a little less sense to me because then it just felt like this like cool narrative trick that they were just implementing on all of these characters, you know. And I think at like certain points it happens like out of convenience. Like there's at certain points where the kids are requesting to be pushed into a memory, or where they're like talking to the ghost and they're like, well, why can't you just push her into a memory? And I'm like, well, that's like, now you're using this like thing that was a cool plot device, but now you're using it just for convenience sake. That was actually like probably like my biggest gripe with the show.
It does seem a little like almost like a Stephen King mechanic, I guess, if you think about it. Like,
yeah, and that's a whole other conversation, but that's again one of the things that always is pulling out of Stephen King books is mechanics of his hauntings and the mechanics of like of these supernatural elements. Like I mean, ultimately, like that is probably my biggest gripe at the show. It stands, it really goes to show how solid the show is because it doesn't take that much away from it. It's still, I think there's a very emotional story kind of at the core of this, and they do use some kind of strange narrative devices to get to it, but it's still super effective. I think like the most effective part of the storyline is the characters and how much you really wind up caring about them in the end. And it's similar to Hill House, like the way they introduce the Crane family, the way they kind of give you that backstory, so that when you finally catch up to present day, you're firmly rooting for them. And that's the same with Bly Manor. Like, the characters like you really care for. The whole time I was like, man, if Owen dies, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna be so upset.
Generally the most purest character of all. Like, yeah, like you're literally like, anytime he's on the screen, you're like, don't kill him. Please just let him get away unscathed. But like every character I'm invested in. There is a point I want to bring up about Haunting of Bly Manor, and it's a small little mechanic that made a huge impact for me being scary, and that's the dollhouse. And when it's explained that the little girl, who is she again?
Flora.
That she knows where these ghosts are, and then you learn each of these ghosts, like the Plague Doctor or the Doll Face, that she's actually putting them in the house where they are. And you look over to the side there, and you see under her dresser is the Lady in the Lake.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, okay, like when that all connected together. But it's like, okay, so she knows where these ghosts are, and so like you see the Plague Doctor's in the attic right now, or Doll Face is in the basement. But when she's looking across and it pans to the Lady in the Lake over top of the bed, I genuinely had like a miniature like heart attack. I was so scared, and I just loved that. I loved how he was able to do something as simple as this little tiny toy and use it to convey an easy mechanic, right? And that's something like, that's the only one of the real genuine scare moments in this, whereas Hill House had a lot more deeper, eerie connections. But I like to see more of that type of little mechanics in horror movies, because a little thing like that can go a long way to just show a little tiny cool point.
Mm-hmm. I think they also have a lot of so a theme that jumps between the two is the theme of family, right? And really, if you break them down both series and compare them, the loss of family creates ghosts, and the reuniting of family exercises ghosts, or however you want to say that. It's an interesting theme. The one thing I didn't really get was the fact that Theodora's character, she ended up like she was just like, hey, I should just start choking people. Like she's like, oh, I lost my family. I should just start choking people. Like if there's a Doug ghost out there, it'd be a while before I defaulted to choking people. It'd be like, oh, I just felt like because okay, so it makes sense with her sister, right? She chokes out her sister because she's being a because she murdered her, and now she is opening that box that she wasn't allowed to open, right? But then like scene two, it's like some guy's like, oh, I'm a plague doctor. I'm helping people. Hey, you're here. I'm gonna choke you, and you're like, why is she choking him? And then she does that to a child, and she does it to like a couple of other people. And it's like, is this a choking ghost? Like, sorry, I'm going off on this on Theodora choking people.
No, that's fine.
But
I think
He also choked Danny for an extended period of time to
yeah,
the point where I'm like, how are you still alive, Danny? Like,
I like how Elliot got choked for 3 seconds and literally almost died, and Danny was choked for like half an hour as she
they
was
get
being
just
dragged to the
drugged
house.
around the house.
And she
Into the
wakes up,
mansion still.
and she wakes up. She's like, "Oh, well, I had a bad dream or whatever." I don't remember how she reacted.
um,
Another thing too. Look, if every other day from like the day you started working there, strange muddy footprints would walk through the house. Like I get it. The first time you see them, you're like, "Oh, these kids are running around." But obviously they're women's feet. Like I could even see that from just on screen. At some point you're like, "Okay, so what woman keeps walking through the house with muddy?" Like I don't know. It's one of those things where I mentioned this a couple times if you've listened to the other ones, where there are points of horror movies or shows or stories that I'm always like, oh, because I would never do that, and it just bothers me a little bit. But anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you. The nature of when a ghost goes from just being a ghost to being a dick is it's interesting, and it never really makes sense to me. Like in my head, I'm like, so if you're a spirit that's haunting the haunting the afterlife or whatever, like why would you want to be this much of an asshole to people? It never makes a lot of sense to me. And I guess like poltergeists explain that a little bit. And more often than not, when it's a ghost that's like particularly terrible, it's like it's a ghost that was like a really terrible thing in when it was alive. It was like the ghost of a murderer or something like that. The lady in the lake is not. She's just like, I guess, like a really proud woman. So having her kind of just turn into this like horrible monster, just like wanting to choke people out. Yeah, it is a bit of a strange it's a bit of a leap for her character. But I don't know. I guess that's like proud nature of her, is like she can be the only person that owns Bly Manor. Like I don't know.
Well, that being said,
Um,
I've never personally choked anybody, so
yeah.
maybe Ghost Doug after choking his first victim would be like, okay, I can get into this. Like that's look, you guys are laughing, but that's definitely what Theodora did. She was just like, oh yeah, I choked my first person, next person, damn. And then there's this guy like, hey, I'm helping the plague victims. Like he gets choked, and and then Peter Quint's like, hey, you kids, stop screwing around. Like gets choked out and dragged around, and you're like, what the hell? So anyway, sorry.
I guess we could like talk about the ending a little bit. I should say like it's not the ending I thought was gonna happen. Like I by the time like watching the last episode, it really wraps up the events in the first like 10 minutes of that episode. And once it kind of wrapped up, I like kind of paused it and looked the timeline on it, and I was like, there's still like 40 more minutes in this episode. I wonder what they're going to do with it. And then it like really starts to go into Danny and gosh, I forgot her name, the gardener, Jamie. Sorry,
Jamie. Yeah, that's right.
Once it starts to get into Danny and Jamie's relationship, I was like, oh wow, like this is nice. I hope this doesn't end in just horrible tragedy for all of us.
Nope.
And like sure enough, like it starts to build towards this inevitable climax, and it's horrible, and it's just the worst feeling, like watching it through to the end. But like I was having this discussion with someone else, and they said about how it's probably like a really good metaphor for what it's like living with someone with like critical kind of like mental illness or something like that, or chronic illness, something like that, because it's this pain that you can't take away or what you do, and it's kind of following them and it's haunting them their entire life. And yeah, and the ending is horrible. It's incredibly tragic. But it really does, more so than Hill House did. And I did enjoy the ending of Hill House, but way more than Hill House did. Like it really makes the storyline so meaningful. And the final ending with the Sheryl Crow song was like super touching. It's a beautiful ending. I really enjoyed it. It was just so devastating, though.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be a theme. An ongoing theme if they continue on. It's like, oh, this girl who, if she's in the third season, the girl who played Nell, the girl who played Danny,
just keeps getting killed.
She's just like, doomed to not have a happy ending at the end of every one of her stories.
I literally thought that the minute she started getting choked out by the lady in the lake, I was like, kill her off again, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like the third iteration, like it's the opening, she just gets killed with a falling anvil on her head or something like that.
Once again, another character, like she's really good at playing another actress, like she's really good at playing that sympathetic character that you're like devastated when she does die. Like I tend to get like attached to her characters that she plays.
Just nitpicking here too. When they flash forward to and they wrap the story up with the gardener like wrapping up her story, and then you're like, oh, they're all the characters. That's cool. And they kind of show who they are.
Mm-hmm.
The dude who's playing the older version of Owen, I'm like, first of all, you look exactly the same age as the younger Owen. Like, why did they pick this guy who's like, I don't know, not more than 3 years older than the younger version was? I'm like, who is this dude?
And then they aged Gina Gugino. Carla Gugino. They aged her to the point where it's like, how many years has this been since this happened? Right?
Yeah.
I know what you mean exactly. Like it was almost inconsistently aged, the people.
Yeah. No, it was good. Wait, did you grow a mustache because of your love for the Owen character?
Yeah, in anticipation. Like I started growing this mustache in the summer because I knew that this character was going to be so lovable. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a dick.
This is going to be my Halloween costume. I'm going to go as Owen Sharma from Bly Manor.
In all honesty, you could pull it off with exactly what you're wearing now. So
I know, it's true. I'll just find an apron to toss on myself and dust myself with some flour.
And just be like charming. And I also too another theme was like Owen's character. Not Owen. Elliot's character. I don't remember his name. What's his name?
My God.
No one's gonna know who we're talking about.
I know.
Characters.
We're talking. Who are we even talking about?
Henry Thomas.
Yeah, Henry Thomas's character. Sorry.
Henry Thomas's character. See, the thing is I wasn't. The one thing I didn't get was he being truly haunted by a ghost, or was that just a mental illness thing? And so there's this whole like aspect that it adds into, because like obviously he felt guilt-ridden because of what happened with his brother and how it like destroyed his family and how they died on their trip to India or whatever it was. In one of the two, you see ghost as being like mental illnesses, like, and that's and even Nell, when her nerd boyfriend, when Nerd Ghost, I don't think that was an actual ghost. I think that was just like a mental illness.
It's kind of like the ghost of their pasts.
Yeah,
I viewed them as.
Yeah. Also, just to clarify, for people are wondering who we're talking about when we're talking about Nerd Ghost, we're talking about her fiance that was tragically killed in that collision. For some reason, because he has glasses, we're calling him a nerd ghost. But anyways,
Also, he
I
did
think
die tragically and stuff, and I'm so sorry for his character. So.
to go back to your point though about those ghosts that aren't really ghosts, that obviously that really does kind of start with Hill House. And like when I first watched Hill House, that's the lens I was looking at it through, was this like, oh, like, are all of these hauntings real, or what is happening to these characters? And in Hill House, it happens a lot, like obviously like Luke's character is being haunted by this ghost, but it's also his addiction, right? It's his addiction that's creating this ghost that follows him. I think like the closest version, like when you think about Henry Thomas's character in this one, and the fact that he's seeing this twisted version of himself, and that's the ghost that's kind of haunting him. It reminds me of like Shirley's ghost in Hill House. Not even a ghost at all, and you really like, you never really get that explanation until that very last episode, one of the very last episodes, and it really kind of puts it into perspective. But the guy holding up the cocktail glass, and the explanation for what is and where he comes from, it's got this like really tragic feel to it. And I think like that's something that this show has really kind of nailed down really well, is the nature that like ghosts aren't just frightening manifestations of evil or something like that, or manifestations of like spirits with like unfinished business or something like that. Like you create these ghosts, and sometimes they can just be like regret, or grief, and it's just gonna follow you, and it's just gonna like kind of sit with you. Reminds me also of like, the Babadook in another way.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think that is a really cool theme that kind of carries through both series, and I do really hope they do more series.
Me too.
Because it would be really cool to see how they explore those.
Did you guys notice that the house seemingly looked like the same set too?
Oh yeah, it was the same set, the same house. That was pretty interesting. I like that.
The main hall is a stairway that goes up and then curves around.
Oh my god!
No, and actually,
I never even put that together. But yeah,
the house looks
the
pretty
kitchens
similar.
are exactly the same. Everything, it's the same house. They just decorate it differently for the set, and so maybe for like if they do future shows, they would also continue with the same house or whatever. Sorry.
Reminds me a lot of the house, the mansion in Resident Evil.
Maybe Resident Evil will be the next chapter in this series.
Yeah.
Where they just adapt the first game.
Episode 3, the haunting of what's the manor in Resident Evil called?
It's the
Spencer Mansion.
Oh yeah, it's the haunting of Spencer Mansion.
Yeah.
I'd be stoked for that.
It would suck because it would be such a.
Thanks for ruining my dreams, Doug.
It'd be such a drastic like and then Nell gets
and now
like...
zombies, yeah. But if they nail it, man, like who knows? Like what if they just like absolutely nail it and they manage to do a Resident Evil TV series that somehow captures the same like themes as Hill House? I'd be into that.
That would be pretty sweet.
Also, well, what does turn of the screw mean? They never really approach the subject again. They're just like, the lady starts like, well, what turn of the screw? There must be 2 turns of the screw. And I'm like, what the hell?
I think that it's implying the tension is like for when kids are involved. I think that was what I was reading. Is like the fact that kids are involved, the attention that is an additional turn of the screw, and it like makes it a lot more tense as soon as kids are involved.
Oh, does anybody else want to add anything?
I just want to make a comment that I noticed early, specifically with Jesse's review, is how much he like really doesn't like Henry James's writing. Like you really came out of this like hating this book, which I found hilarious. Jesse's just like hates Henry James. We should just make him read another Henry James book.
No, please. That's my haunting of Hill House. Haunting is me having to go live through Henry James's work over and over again. No, I just didn't like it. It was boring.
No, it wasn't very interesting.
I completely agree. I think this is one that where like I'm sure at the weigh in we'd probably all agree that it's one where the adaptation is so much better than the book. Like,
yeah, it was like
100%,
Star Trek.
yeah.
Like so, we've had two now where Starship Troopers was better and Haunting of Bly
And
Manor
this
was
one
better.
for sure. Yeah.
And then the other ones, like, I mean, it's debatable, but I think that you could argue that the books were better. It's all very debatable, but these ones are two like slam dunks in my opinion.
So what do you guys think? WWE casting?
Yeah, let's get into our recurring segment where we ask our favorite WWE superstars to play the roles of the novel. So
Vince
Who would be-
plays Henry.
plays the governess.
Yeah.
Actually, Vince is a very good casting for Henry Wingrave or whatever his name is, Elliot's character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying not to call him Elliot because apparently for some odd reason you guys don't like me calling him by his real name. So.
Vince is a good call for that one.
The Great Khali for at least one of the characters. So
I like
as,
how
as Owen Sharma's character.
super racist. Like that's definitely what
might as well
WWE.
get another brown character, another brown actor to play him. Somehow equally as charming though.
Yeah. You know what?
Just
I
like-
actually really want to see this. I would. I just want to put the Great Khali in a love role, like no, what is that, romance role or whatever.
Well, he had that whole character as the Punjabi playboy for a while, which was so confusing. But it's up his alley. Like I feel like it's something he would up for.
Of two, yeah. It's funny when you watch, like, when you try to cast these like spooky movies, that my mind immediately goes to, well, like obviously Bray Wyatt would fit in there somewhere, but I'm like, he'd have to be a ghost. He'd have to be the lady in the lake. He dressed up as sister if he was doing his sister Abigail that he never got to do, like in the match with Finn Balor.
Yeah,
that's how he does the lady in the lake.
You can have Becky Lynch as Peter Quinn.
Yeah, just the closest. First of all, Becky Lynch is Irish.
Why wouldn't it be Drew McIntyre if we wanted to go for accents?
I don't know, just because they both have red hair.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. In the book, actually, Peter Quinn has red hair, right? Like
yeah, he does.
Sorry.
Which I feel is just their subtle ginger like hate-ons like coming through.
Yeah. Because obviously too in the book, which we never touched on this actually now that I'm thinking about it, but the book obviously had some themes of child abuse between Peter Quint. So there's like a ginger hate on because it's like all ginger's child abuse. That's the
Oh yeah. Wait, you guys got
right.
that too. There was definitely there was like one or two lines of like he's like, oh, he was just too free with the and I'm just like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I like in the back of my mind? I'm like, maybe
is my mind in the gutter here? Like,
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. But I guess if you guys go pick that up too,
I've definitely picked it up.
I'm not.
There's even like a synopsis about it, how the whole novel was about child abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of the interpretations of it are that the ghosts are ghosts of child molesters. So I was really kind of stealing myself when I was watching the TV show. I was like, oh boy, I hope that's not what the route they take on this show.
They really dodged that bullet, eh?
So we need someone who would be a convincing child abuser to play the part of Peter Quint is what we're saying.
The WWE roster.
Yeah. So who's the most despicable wrestler you can think of? There's a lot of them.
There's a lot.
Anything else you guys want to bring up? I think we've covered it all pretty well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Page and Screen. Our next pick for book club is A Boy and His Dog, a short story written by Harlan Ellison, and we will be watching the adaptation from 1975, also called A Boy and His Dog. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Special thanks, as always, to me and my friend for creating all the music you hear on this show. If you'd like to hear more of their music, check them out by visiting meandmyfriend.bandcamp.com. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like us, leave us a review and a rating. You can also connect with us on social media. We are at Page and Screen 1 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also search Page and Screen on YouTube, where you can watch a video version of this show. We post regular updates of all the books we read and all the movies we watch, and boy, we would love to hear your thoughts on them. And finally, make sure you spread the word about this show. If you know a book nerd or a film geek in your life, please pass it on. We would love to reach new people. Maybe you know someone who hates shepherd's pie as much as I do. Until the next Page and Screen, thank you for listening.